Okay, moving right along, it's my really great pleasure to bring onto the stage one of the world's greatest internet investors and entrepreneurs who also has some really far-out ideas about the universe, and you'll hear about that in a moment. Please welcome to the stage the founder of DST Global, Yuri Milner. Welcome, Yuri.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. The first time I met Yuri was in 2010. I saw him at a conference in Europe, and then I saw him a few days later, and it was several months after you had invested how much money in Facebook?
Close to $1 billion.
But it wasn't $1 billion at that point? Yes, okay. And he talked about it, and I introduced myself and said, wow, I heard your presentation. He said, what do you think? And I said, I sure hope you know what you're doing. And you made a little bit of profit on that $1 billion investment, didn't you?
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
We're going to divide our time here roughly in half. We're going to talk about Yuri's views on the investment world first, and then we're going to talk about your views on the universe second. Tell us what you're thinking about investing right now.
Well, I think we probably need to look a little bit back to see what happened in the last 10 years, to really appreciate where we are today. So 10 years ago, the market cap of all internet consumer companies was about $500 billion, and today is $2.5 billion. So on average, every 5 years, $1 trillion worth of value was added and created. About 3/4 of that was created in Silicon Valley and United States in general, and a quarter rest of the world, mostly in China. And with all the corrections and sort of overvaluations and unicorns and whatever else people talk about right now, describing where we are today, I think it was a tremendous success overall. And another incredible fact is that 40% of this value was created by new companies, startups, and 60% by the companies that already existed at the time. So I think that this whole space made a tremendous progress, and so far. Of course, the most interesting question is what's going to happen in the future.
Right. What's going to happen in the future?
On a macro side, I think that there are a lot of positive things that will happen. I cannot say it's going to happen next year, but I think we can reliably try to make a prediction over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's only 45% of people in the world that have access to internet, compared to 75% TV penetration and 65% phone penetration. So I think we have a long way to go. And the projection that we made calls for roughly $1 trillion worth of value to be created every 5 years going forward through 2050. So I think for the next 35 years, we are pretty safe staying in that space and trying to find investment opportunities. Of course, the most interesting question is, should we invest mostly in public companies that are already there, and will they re-up most of the value, or it will be new companies that will be created in the next 5-10 years that will become significant?
And just so everyone is clear, looking backward, the predominance was with the newer, was the better
older companies. Was 60%.
Was the older?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So will this 40% hold? It's hard to say. I think there are certain arguments to be made that the already existing companies will re-up maybe more value than 60%. And, I've heard people arguing both ways. But it looks like every generation of founders and every generation of users somehow create new products and use those products.
Now, you raise an interesting point that essentially all of the value created in the sector that you look at over the time that you've been an active investor has been in the United States and China, and most of that in the United States, which is, you know, sort of mind-blowing. You told me that Europe is effectively negligible. How do you see that going forward?
Well, if I would make a prediction, I would just say that this country will continue to dominate with more than 50% market share. I'm not sure it's going to be 75, but I would not be surprised that it will be as big as 70. So I think China obviously created somewhat isolated environment, and that allowed significant companies to emerge in China as well. But we spend increasing amount of time in Europe and in India, and we see a lot of sort of early stage activity taking place there as well.
You're looking backwards so that people can understand your investment mindset. What was it that you saw in Facebook that gave you the confidence to invest so much so early?
Well, when we invested in around 2009, and that was the time when Facebook was pretty well established in the US, but branching outside the United States and sort of conquering the world. So what we, you know, by design or coincidence, we have looked at pretty much all social networks around the world and invested in some of them. And we knew that it's a very powerful model. We knew through our own investment experience. And we also knew that this is the business model that can monetize. And I remember there were a lot of doubts at the time where Facebook can really monetize its traffic. But I think we've been very fortunate to travel around the world at the time and get exposed to various variations of Facebook and clones of Facebook. Some of them are even surviving today and doing well, like one in Russia, for example. And through that exposure, which I think a lot of US investors lacked at the time, we concluded that it's maybe a safer bet than many believed.
And wasn't your exposure not just as an investor but also as an operator in Russia? Was it a much smaller market, a much smaller scale? Didn't you feel that you saw things that would happen?
Yeah. So I remember that we have invested in this company, which was really a pretty close clone of Facebook, and the servers were down for a few hours, and then the customer service received 10,000 emails in a few minutes, and 95% of them were positive. So this was one of the leading indicators for me.
You have several marquee investments right now. Can you just share with everybody one that you're most excited about?
Well, we have invested in, we've been lucky to invest in some of the companies that have done well. But you know, you need to go much further than the stage. So Airbnb is one of our big investments, and it's a very exciting company.
I'll leave some time later for more talk on investments, and let's shift to the universe. You are trained as a physicist. You're interested in questions like, is there life outside of our solar system in the universe, and also how can we go find out? So you've committed, I believe, $200 million of your own money to these two questions. Start with whichever one you'd like to start with.
Well, it looks like historically Silicon Valley was the place where people were intrigued by those questions, and a lot of people who have made some money, they reinvested them, some of it in trying to get the answer. Even Hewlett and Packard have been trying to find out. But what we are funding beginning January 1st this year is a unprecedented in terms of scale effort to try to receive a signal from extraterrestrial civilization. So we are renting time on the largest radio telescopes in the world, and this is a 10-year project, trying to use the latest processing technology and hardware, and we're sifting through the information 1,000 times faster than any previous search. So the reason I think it's time to relaunch this effort right now, which used to be called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is that according to the latest data collected by NASA, there are about 20 billion planets like ours with liquid water on the surface in the right place just in our galaxy, just in the Milky Way. I mean, this is a fact that was proven in the last few years. So with so many opportunities just in our galaxy, and this 20 billion should be multiplied by a number of galaxies, that happens to be 200 billion. So 200 billion by 20 billion, it's hard to believe that we're alone in the universe and that this whole thing was created just for us. So I think that there are reasonable chances that if civilization reaches a certain stage, they will use the same technologies we're using, because there is nothing else to use, actually. And that we will be able to detect radio waves that they are emitting, either on purpose, trying to contact someone, or through something which is called leakage, like we are transmitting right now. The radars that we're using to track planes are visible through the fair part of our galaxy. So it's very possible that somebody can detect us before we detect them.
And is your initiative focused more on sending a signal or receiving a signal?
No, this is just listening.
Listening.
No, sending signal is a much more controversial subject, and there are many views on whether we should be doing this. But actually, we are doing it already through this leakage. But we are doing a much more benign thing, which is just listening if we can hear something.
And I remember the first time we discussed this, you told me you had an opinion, and it is opinion, right? And what is it? And whether or not there is life out there.
Well, I think that we can spend a lot of time debating it, and there is something which is called Fermi paradox, which is like, if there is someone out there, why we have not been visited already? They had a few billion years ahead of us to develop. But the fact of the matter is, and the amazing fact is, that we now have technology to test the theory. And I think it's almost hard to believe that we're not doing it. And we have not been doing it really for the last 5 to 10 years at any scale. So I think if we do have technology and we do have some resources to dedicate collectively to this project, I think we absolutely should be doing it at all time. Because if we do find that we are not alone in the universe, it could be one of the biggest discoveries ever. So I think it's worth pursuing.
And it's interesting. I love your use of the language, because you're saying that you think that with this initiative we can prove one way or another more with greater probability.
Right.
And get greater confidence in the answer one way or the other. But I still want to know what you think the answer is going to be.
By the way, either answer is pretty staggering. If
Understood.
we're alone in the universe, then probably it would be kind of time to think about, not being crazy and that sort of thing, and just preserving what we have. And if we are not alone in the universe, I think it's pretty amazing too, so that we can think about, maybe establishing some contact and stuff like that. So
We've got options.
We've got options, yes. So I think what is really not an option is not to keep looking.
Okay, change gears. You also are funding an extremely audacious initiative to send a physical probe to another galaxy. Tell everybody about that.
Yeah, to another star.
To another star. Thank
Yes. So Interstellar Travel was really sort of the dream of many generations for many thousands of years. And the assumption always was that we're not ready to do this. And technology is not there. And actually they were right. The technology was not there. But what we have discovered to my own amazement, is that actually in the last 15 years we've made enough progress to send an unmanned probe to the nearby star. And just to give you the sense of the numbers that, or the scale of what needs to happen, is that there is absolutely no way that in any foreseeable future we will be able to send humans, because it's just not enough energy on our planet to be able to do this. And we need to travel at the speed of about 20% of speed of light, which is 1,000 times faster than we can travel right now, to get to the nearby star in 20 years. I think 20 years is a good benchmark. So within a lifetime of a generation, if one can get there in terms of send something there and get a few images back of a possible planet, I think this will be pretty cool. So, but 1,000 times faster than we can travel now seems like a big stretch. But in the last 100 years, we already increased the speeds that we can send objects at by a factor of 1,000. So we need to do pretty much the same thing that we did in the last 100 years, but maybe in the next 20 years. And the only way to do it, the only conceivable way, is to use a very small spaceship, completely contrary to what we think about interstellar travel. And I can actually show you how it will look like.
This is the ultimate show and tell coming.
Yeah, so this is the size of the spaceship that you should be talking about. Because if it is significantly more than 1 gram, then again, you just don't have enough energy to accelerate it. But this is a fully functional spaceship with 4 cameras and the communication laser, and it's kind of less than 1/4 of an inch, if you can see it here.
Wow.
And the only way you can accelerate it to that speed is to use a very big ground-based laser to shoot from the ground and attach this to a sail which will accelerate it to those kind of speeds in a matter of a few minutes.
How many probes will you send? Or, I'm sorry,
Well,
spaceships.
the beauty of the system is that you can send a few thousand of them, because you can mass produce them.
Yep.
As opposed to the way we're exploring space right now, that you build something for a long time, and then it's a few $1 billion worth, and then you launch one of them. So in fact, you can send many of them, and a few of them will survive a pretty hostile interstellar medium between us and Alpha Centauri.
And before I go to the audience for questions, if I understand correctly, these are relatively inexpensive. The laser is not. And tell everyone what Moore's Law has to do with this, if you would.
Well, apparently Moore's Law is playing itself out not only in the space of microelectronics, which allows us to do this, and 10 years ago, the same functionality would be 100 times heavier.
Okay.
Right, just in 10 years.
Yep.
So that's what Moore's Law is doing here. Now, in laser technology, Moore's Law is actually playing itself out as well. So lasers becoming more powerful and cheaper, roughly doubling at the power doubling every 18 months, and the cost, half every 18 months. So in the next 10 years, if the trend will continue, and we believe it will be possible to build this big laser on the ground, which will be the size of 1 by 1 kilometer.
Huh.
And then a small thing like this can be accelerated to 20% of speed of light.
I know that one question people ask you that you want an opportunity to answer is, you could be spending $200 million more when you take in the people who invest with you or spend with you on curing diseases, alleviating poverty. Why this esoteric quest?
Well, it's a difficult question. It's also an easy question.
Uh-huh.
It's difficult if it is not viewed on a relative basis. So if other people would have been doing this, then it wouldn't make sense to spend another $100 million. But if you look at total amount of money that we spend on everything, to spend a negligible fraction of 1% to pursue sort of this high-risk, high-reward projects, I think we as human beings have always been doing this, like always, for the last few thousand years, and that's the reason why we're sitting here, that even in tough times during wars and famines, and things have been tougher, a few hundred years ago. People have been dying at age 35, and yet there were some people who were funding, long-term projects. So I think we collectively need to decide what percentage of our resources we spend on trying to address existential questions. And I think this number should not be zero.
And you have the money to do it. Let's take a question, please. Right here, please. And again, I'll save time by introducing Mike Quatinetz.
So I'm curious about the photography aspect. At what speed will photos come back? So if something's 20 years to get there,
it will take four years to get there, because the nearest star, which is called Alpha Centauri, is 4 light years away. So it's exactly 4 years for the pictures to get there. So if we
4 years to come back.
4 years to come back. Yeah.
Yeah. So 24 years.
24 years total, and you can assume that we probably should be thinking about launching it in about 20, 30 years, because it will take time for technology to evolve. So we should be talking about maybe something like 50 years from now.
Okay, thanks.
You're going to have a really big party
sorry to say that.
when the images come back, right?
I think you can have the first party when you launch it.
Okay, yeah. Great answer. Yuri likes to have parties. Go ahead, please, identify yourself.
Hi, this is Aaron from Dog Vacay. Do you believe that there's intelligent life on other planets? And if so, why haven't we seen anything?
Yeah, Fermi paradox. So there are 50 ways to answer your question. And the favorite way in Silicon Valley is that we're living in a simulation. That actually...
We finally got to that in this conference, yeah.
So if we are living in a simulation, then it's a perfect explanation. Then, somebody is playing game, and we are a part of this game. And of course, it's a pretty dangerous assumption, because, the question is, when should they turn off the game? And the answer is when we'll find out that it's indeed a simulation. So I prefer not to focus on this. But I think this is a subject that was debated for the last 50 years, back and forth, and I have my explanation. And my explanation is that it's very hard to send something more than this at those high speeds and at those huge distances. So it's 25 trillion miles. And if you send a macro object, and the macro object, like a big spaceship like in Star Wars, if that type of object collides with a small speck of interstellar dust, and there is plenty of that stuff out there, it will be equivalent to a nuclear explosion. So it's a very dangerous thing to travel at those speeds if you are a macro object. So, but I think it's very possible that these things are flying all around us, and we have no way of knowing, because we're not tracking such small objects flying at high speeds. Even now, we would not be able to track them. So my explanation is that it's a job of robots, explore the universe, and the small robots, not big robots.
So I'm sorry. So ladies and gentlemen, I just want to point out to you that we've gone from reordering Gatorade to intelligent life in the universe in the span of 15 minutes at this conference. And Yuri, thank you for sharing your vision with us.
Thank you.